a hoodie, a clipboard, and a woman who thought she'd already met the important people in her life. It started in a showroom that smelled like eucalyptus and wealth. Glass walls, stone floors, and not a single surface left untouched by curation. Before we begin, what country are you watching from? And just out of curiosity, what time is it for you right now? Wherever you are, we're so glad you're here. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. The woman's name was Elise Carrington. If you read interior design magazines in the 90s, you probably know the name. She was once called the Velvet Hammer, sharp, immaculately styled, and famously allergic to mediocrity. Clients didn't hire her to decorate. They hired her to baptize their houses in taste. Her showroom, Carrington Atelier, was legendary. There were rumors she had once turned down a royal because he insisted on leather bar stools. Elise preferred linen. Leather, she said, was for boardrooms, not breakfast. She was in her mid-50s now, though no one dared ask. Her hair, silver and purposeful, was always pulled back. Pearls, always, even on weekends. And her voice, low, smooth, dangerous, like espresso poured over ice. That morning, she arrived late. She swept in with her assistant flanking her like a Secret Service detail, carrying fabric swatches and annotated renderings. They had an 11 a.m. consult with a real estate developer, someone flush with cash and devoid of taste. Elise had made a career out of rescuing such people from themselves. She didn't notice the young man at first, or if she did, she assumed he was part of the delivery crew. He was sitting quietly on a bench near the reception desk, hoodie, jeans, calloused hands resting on his knees. He looked up briefly when she walked in, a glance, not a stare, and then looked back down at his phone. That was Milo King. He didn't stand, didn't offer a handshake, didn't pretend to know the rules of the room. To Elise, that was enough. He wasn't anybody. The meeting began in the signature consultation room. Minimalist, polished concrete, abstract art placed just so. Elise moved through her pitch like a conductor, speaking of flow, light, texture, memory. Her voice slowed on the word provenance. It always landed well, but then the client asked a question. Something small, something technical about ceiling insulation in high humidity climates. Before she could answer, Milo spoke up. Use closed-cell spray foam. Higher R value. Moisture resistant. The room turned. Elise blinked. Once. The client tilted his head. I'm sorry, she said to the boy tightly. Are you here for the meeting? No, he replied, calm. I just overheard. Then please don't. She didn't wait for a response. She turned back to the client, smile ironed onto her face. The moment passed. Barely. When the meeting wrapped, Elise's assistant gathered the swatches. The client left pleased. Elise followed him to the door, gracious, elegant as always. And when she returned, Milo was still there. Same bench, same hoodie. She walked over. I don't believe we've met. No, ma'am. Then let's fix that. He stood, taller than she expected. Maybe late 20s. Face clean, but not soft. Skin like someone who worked in the sun. I'm Milo King. I sent you an email last month about a portfolio review. Her face didn't change, but the silence grew teeth. I get 100 emails a day, she said. You didn't include a recommendation, a license, or a body of work. What did you expect? Just 5 minutes. Of my time? He nodded. She exhaled, a sigh dressed up as a breath. I don't mentor. I don't do talent scouting. I don't owe anyone a ladder. You understand? I do. He said it without flinching. Then I suggest, she continued, you find someone who builds staircases instead of climbing them barefoot. He smiled at that. Not mocking. More like recognition. Good line, he said. Mind if I use it someday? She turned and walked away. The next morning, a package arrived at her office. No name, just a return address. East Oak Street, no suite number. Inside, a wooden box, handmade, sanded smooth. The lid slid open with a whisper. Inside, 6 photographs, before and after shots of rooms, not glossy, not posed, but intimate, restored kitchens, a mural painted in a shelter, a bookshelf built into a hospital wall, filled with donated novels and paperbacks, and on the spine of one, faint writing in pen, "For the days that feel too long." At the bottom of the box, a card. "You said you don't mentor. That's fine. But if I'm lucky enough to cross your path again, I'd rather you remember what I do than what I wore. MK." She closed the lid, didn't respond, but she didn't throw it away either. A month passed. She saw his name again, once, in a community bulletin about a food bank renovation. Then again, mentioned by a client who said, "There's this kid doing crazy stuff with reclaimed materials. Feels like art, but functional." Elise didn't flinch, but something lodged behind her ribs, a sensation she couldn't name. One evening, during a fundraiser at a sculpture garden, she overheard 2 junior designers whispering, "That guy, Milo, he's self-taught, grew up near that old mill on Ridgeway. People say he used to dumpster dive for scrap metal and turn it into chairs." Elise sipped her wine, didn't say a word. It was 6 months later when she saw him again. But this time, it wasn't in her space. It was in his. A client invited her to a soft launch of a new community arts center. Said, "You have to come see the work this kid did. They're calling it minimalist warmth, whatever that means." Elise went. Out of boredom, she told herself. The building was modest on the outside. Inside, it felt like breath. Plaster walls, natural light, handmade tile lining a single arched corridor. Each tile painted with a quote, etched by different hands. Not all perfect, but together they sang. In one room, a table built from the floorboards of an old basketball court, still showing the faint lines of the 3-point arc. In another, a wall of photographs, all black and white, all donated, all framed in wood made from dismantled church pews. And in the final room, the studio, Milo stood, sleeves rolled, helping a child paint over graffiti on a salvaged panel. He didn't see her. She watched him quietly for a full minute, then left before he looked up. That night, she sat in her garden, glass of wine in one hand, Milo's old card in the other. She read it again. Then she opened her laptop. She found the first open project on her docket, a guest suite in a private listing. The client had no strong opinions. She typed, "Milo King, would you be interested in a 1-room commission? Full creative control. One condition, no credit, just the work." She didn't expect him to say yes, but the next morning she found a message in her inbox. "If it's about the room, I'm in. If it's about us, I don't need a clean slate, just a wall to paint on." She stared at that line for a long time. Then, for the first time in years, Elise Carrington smiled, without arranging her face first. The room wasn't much, a small square guest suite inside a high-end development outside the city. Elise had designed the master bedroom herself. Layered velvets, custom lighting, silk drapery in a deep slate blue. The guest suite, though, had been left untouched, an afterthought. 4 walls and a door. A blank space that no one cared about, which made it the perfect place to test someone who didn't have a license, or a last name that opened doors. Elise didn't meet him in person the day he arrived. She left the keys under the mat, and a note that read, 7 days. You can bring your own team. Budget enclosed. No branding. No social media. If I like what I see, we'll talk. If not, we won't. Milo arrived with a single duffel bag and a box of tools. No crew, no drone shots, no buzz. Just one man, alone with his work. He moved in silence, like someone trained to listen for what rooms wanted to say. On the first day, he didn't tear anything down. He walked, touched the walls, opened the window, let air in, let light in. He sat on the floor and stared at the corners, as if looking for cracks in the silence. On the second day, the work began. He removed the trim and rebuilt it from old railway ties he found at a salvage yard. He sanded the closet door until its grain revealed a scar like a fingerprint. He installed a reading sconce made from parts of a decommissioned piano. By the fourth day, something had changed. Elise noticed it when she came to drop off fabric samples for another room. She walked past the guest suite, not intending to stop, but a smell caught her. Something like cedar and citrus and warmth. She paused at the threshold. The walls had been lime-washed, soft and matte, like powdered stone. A narrow shelf ran the length of one wall, holding nothing but a single ceramic bowl. Hand-thrown, imperfect, elegant. He wasn't there, but the space felt inhabited, like someone thoughtful had been there and left. She stepped inside, closed the door behind her. She took off her shoes, and just for a moment she sat on the edge of the custom bench he'd built beneath the window. It was wide and low, sanded smooth, with a cushion covered in undyed linen. The light from outside filtered through new curtains, gauze-thin and butter-soft. It didn't feel like a showroom. It felt like a memory she hadn't made yet. When he returned for a key on the seventh day, he didn't leave a note. No invoice, no signature on the wall, just the room. Elise stood in the doorway and said simply, "It's good." He nodded once. "Thanks," then turned to go. She stopped him. "Where did you find the material for the shelf?" "A lumber yard near the river. They were throwing it out. Used to be flooring from a dance studio." Her brow lifted. You know that how?" He smiled. "There was a paper stuck to the back. Said, 'Recital Schedule, 1987. Thought that was worth saving." She looked at him. Harder this time. "You could have been something, you know," she said, "if you'd taken a different path." "I still might," he said, walking toward the door. She frowned. "You're not interested in being someone?" "I'm interested in being useful." She had no answer to that, but later that night she sat in the room he'd made, barefoot, glass of wine in hand, and whispered to herself, "Useful," like it was a spell she'd forgotten how to cast. She didn't tell anyone he'd done it, not at first. But when a tech CEO came in looking for something more grounded, less glossy, she showed him the guest suite. The CEO stood in the room for almost 10 minutes without speaking, then turned to her and said, "This feels like a place where people remember who they are." Elise nodded once. "We call it the King Room." She didn't explain, but word got out anyway. And slowly, project by project, Milo's work began to travel further than he ever did. He turned down a luxury hotel job because the owner said he wanted Instagrammable corners. Milo said he only built rooms that people could cry in and not feel embarrassed. The owner didn't understand, but other people did. A chef commissioned him to design a single booth in her restaurant, the one where she planned to propose to her girlfriend. A midwife hired him to restore her garage into a place where women could labor in peace. He didn't design for Instagram. He designed for stories, and people remembered that. One fall morning, Elise called him. Her voice was strained. Not angry, not stressed, just off. "I have a question," she said. "Okay. If someone's mother dies, and you've spent most of your life resenting her, and then suddenly there's no one left to argue with, what do you do?" Milo didn't answer right away. "Do you want the truth?" he asked. "I wouldn't have called you if I didn't." "You sit with it. You let it be complicated, and you make something anyway." She was silent. Then, "Would you come over?" "Now?" "Yes." He did. She wasn't in pearls that night. No blazer, just a faded college sweatshirt and socks with holes in the toe. Her hair was unbrushed, her eyes soft. The Carrington house was warm, too warm, like she didn't know how to change the settings without her mother there. "I didn't like her," Elise said, handing him a cup of tea. "She didn't like me either, but she taught me to draw a straight line without a ruler, and she said silk was tacky unless it draped like water. That was her thing. Milo nodded. They sat in silence. Then she pulled out a box, old photos, letters, a cracked measuring tape, and a deed. She left me the house, but not enough to keep it. He looked at the papers. She didn't explain further, and he didn't press. Instead, he stood and walked to the fireplace, where a crooked painting hung. She hung that herself, Elise said, even though I told her it needed to be centered. He looked at it, then back at her. Maybe she knew something about off-center. Elise blinked, then smiled, just barely. Over the next few months, Milo visited more often, sometimes to help fix things, sometimes to sit. Once, she called at 2 a.m. and said, "What color is grief?" He said, "Teal, or burnt orange, depending on the season." She laughed quietly. He started bringing food. Bread he baked himself, roasted squash with honey, warm things that made her kitchen smell like somebody lived there. She never asked him to stay, but he often did. In the guest room he'd once built with no promise of credit. And one night, she sat on the floor next to him, barefoot, cradling a mug of tea. "I lied," she said. "About what?" "When I said you could have been something. You already were. I just didn't see it." Milo looked at her. "You weren't wrong," he said. "You just didn't know how to see someone who didn't need your map." She nodded. That night, she slept better than she had in years. The bank sent the letter on a Tuesday. Elise had just come in from watering the garden, something she only recently started doing herself. The envelope was thick, official-looking. She opened it at the kitchen table, hands still smelling faintly of rosemary and soil. Mortgage statement. Balance due. $227,000. She'd known it was coming. Her mother's death had transferred the house fully into her name, but the expenses were heavier than expected. Taxes, repairs, a second appraisal. The kind of slow bleed that doesn't kill you quickly, just makes you tired in a way that sleep can't fix. She folded the letter, set it aside, made herself a cup of coffee, and stared out the window for a long time. That night, Milo came by. He didn't knock anymore. She told him not to. He was carrying a box of screws and a small brass fixture. "Bathroom light," he said simply. She nodded. "Go ahead." He worked in silence. Elise sat on the couch with her feet tucked under her. The light above her flickered twice before warming into a soft glow. "There," he said, wiping his hands. "Won't buzz anymore." She looked at him. Truly looked. "You ever think about owning something?" she asked. "Like what?" "A house, a business, She stopped. "A nameplate on a door." He smiled faintly. "I like keys better." "Why?" "They're humble. They don't assume. You have to know what door they open." She tilted her head. "I think you already know what doors you open." He didn't answer. She almost asked him for help with the mortgage. Almost. But pride is a tricky thing, especially when you spend your whole life pretending you never needed help. So instead, she asked him to stay for dinner. They ate quietly. Roast chicken, steamed greens, a lemon tart she picked up from a bakery and pretended she'd made. As he was leaving, she handed him a manila folder. "What's this?" he asked. "Design drafts for a lakeside cabin. I told a client I'd pitch a proposal." "You want me to collaborate?" "I want you to lead. I'll put your name on the cover sheet." He blinked. "You sure?" "No," she said. "But I'm ready to be." He nodded, slid the folder under his arm, and left without another word. 2 weeks later, she received another envelope. Same logo, same weight. But this one was different. Inside, a letter, a confirmation. Outstanding balance, paid in full. No explanation. No second page. Just a copy of the wire receipt and a new mortgage statement, zeroed out. Elise stared at it for a long time, then called the bank. They confirmed it. A transfer. Anonymous. From a private account. No name listed. No message included. She hung up. walked to the guest room, sat on the bench he'd built years ago, and cried. Not loudly, not messily, just quietly, fully. The kind of cry you have when the world decides to give back something it took without apology. She didn't bring it up the next time she saw him. Didn't ask, didn't accuse. Instead, she invited him in, offered tea, sat beside him on the kitchen tile while the kettle boiled. "I sold the velvet sofa," she said casually. He arched an eyebrow. "Too loud," she added. "Didn't fit anymore." He nodded, sipping his tea. They didn't need to say anything else. But later, as he stood to leave, he reached into his jacket pocket and handed her something. A photo. Black and white. Faded. A teenage girl in overalls and paint-stained hands, crouched beside a half-finished mural. Behind her, a wall scrawled with the words, "Some things are worth building even if no one sees them." "That's you?" he asked. She took the photo slowly. Her voice cracked. "That's me at 17. I found it taped inside an old toolbox at the shelter." She stared at it. "I didn't know that photo still existed." "It does now," he said. "Thought you should have it back." She touched the edges of the print like it might dissolve. "I believed in things then," she whispered. "I just got tired of waiting for permission." Milo put a hand on her shoulder. "You don't need it anymore." News of the paid mortgage spread, eventually, her assistant asked. A few friends speculated. Some said she'd had a secret inheritance. Others guessed she'd made a quiet deal with the city for preserving historic value. She never corrected them, but in the corner of her living room, beneath a shelf of books, and beside a tiny lamp shaped like a lighthouse, sat a frame. Inside, a single piece of lined notebook paper. In Milo's handwriting, "For what you saw, too late, but still saw." Years passed. Elise retired from design formally, though people still called her now and then. She mostly said no. Instead, she traveled, taught one semester at a university, volunteered at a women's shelter, hosted community dinners where no one had to dress up or explain their jobs. And every holiday, without fail, a simple box would arrive on her doorstep. Same brown wrapping, same handwritten tag. No return address, no instructions, just curiosity. Inside, small things. A wood shaving shaped like a feather, a stone polished to look like a teardrop, a dried sprig of lavender sealed in beeswax, never signed, but always understood. Milo opened his own studio the following year. Not a design firm, a restoration house. Its motto was carved above the door. Repair, reveal, remember. He took on apprentices, not just young designers, but ex-cons, refugees, veterans, people whose hands knew how to hurt, but wanted to learn how to hold. They made tables, chairs, doors, headboards, and when people asked what style it was, he said, "Memory forward." It caught on. His waiting list grew, but he never stopped showing up for Elise, sometimes in person, sometimes through the boxes, always through the work. One spring morning, she asked him to walk the property line with her. They wandered past old rose bushes and a crumbling bird bath. She pointed to a spot beneath a cedar tree. "That's where I want my bench." "Your what?" "When I'm gone. I want a bench, right here, facing the west." He nodded. "Got it. And under the bench I want a box." "What kind of box?" "Wooden. Sealed. Nothing inside." He paused. "Why?" She looked up at the tree, the sunlight casting slow-moving shadows through the needles. "Because not every box has to hold something. Some just remind people to make space." She passed quietly, years later. In her sleep. No service, by request. But a few people gathered anyway, former clients, one or two apprentices. Her assistant now graying herself, and Milo. He built the bench himself, reclaimed oak, carved along the edge. She restored more than rooms. Beneath it, The box, empty, on purpose. And every now and then, someone leaves a flower on the bench, or a sketch, or a folded note. And once, a small bronze plaque appeared, affixed gently to the wood. She said he'd never make it. He paid off her mortgage, and then he kept coming back. Because sometimes the debt we carry isn't financial. Sometimes it's the weight of not being seen. Sometimes it's the memory of a voice that said, "You're not ready," when all we needed was room. And when someone finally does give us that room, even if it's late, even if it's flawed, forgiveness can build more than walls. It can build wings. He never told anyone what he did. He never asked her to say thank you. He just made sure the house stayed standing. Because love, when it's quiet and steady and earned, doesn't ask for applause. It just pays the mortgage and then lays the foundation for something better.